All right, hello everybody. So we're gonna go to the slideshow and let's see if I can get it up okay. Everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay. So last time we did talk about what our options were, and so I've just decided to finish this in order. There being no a big demand, so I'm just going to today finish the broad brush review of the first 5,000 years of history, and then we'll take a slightly deeper look at the age of religion, which we just finished, and then we're going to go on to the history of the civilizations we've been ignoring in the New World. I'm very sensitive about that because of Juan Jose. So Juan Jose, you will see that one of the new civilizations that enters the world is the South America, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. And then when we're done with that, we'll go onward to the Reformation. So that is just the rough idea of where we're going. If anybody has any stronger ideas or suggestions, why we're open. So we finished. I reviewed these stages of history, and we just finished religion. The next stop is going to be the age of the Reformation and what I'm terming reason as a bow to the Greeks. Then uh, we'll go, that will last until around 1800 and the Industrial Revolution. And then finally in 1950, we go to the age of communication. So that's the long range view. And when we get into the age of reason and reformation, it's also the age of ideology. And it's nationalism, which Ramsey condemns at every chance, leads actually comes from the Enlightenment thinkers, and of course the American Revolution takes its cue from the Enlightenment, and then we'll go on into the isms later on. So we finally, this is the full roadmap, and we finally end up where we are now, which is a restless age, trying to figure out which way to go. Um, and I just want to review this. I've been breaking down the six major ways of managing power, just to kind of have dimensions that we can look at to compare and contrast different civilizations. So, and this comes from Juan Jose's question, what is a civilization? And I think it has all these elements in sequence as civilizations get more and more complex. Um, I want to just then look at the three classical civilizations using those six ways of managing power and how they were deployed in each of the three great classical civilizations, because that was our base. That's where we started. They all fell around 500, mostly at the hands of the steppe barbarians, that energy that came out, mainly the Huns. They seem to be everywhere. But before they fell, what did they look like? Because they all reconstituted themselves. And I think if you look at the six ways of managing power, and I'm using the color coding. India, the religion was the dominant way, Hinduism and the caste system. The power was controlled through the caste system. If you were born and you didn't dare try to leave your role. In China, it was a more ethical system. It was nominally a meritocracy. You passed an exam, and then you were a part of the administration and the bureaucracy, and their legitimacy was seen as earned. But it was all based on the Confucian ethical system. In the Mediterranean, of these three classical, they relied more on consent. And by that, I mean Rome more than the Greeks. We think of Greeks as the home of democracy, and democracy means consent. But they didn't last very long. They weren't very good colonizers. And it's because they didn't seek consent from the nations they captured. They were very bad emperors. But the Romans were smarter. They were cagier, and they worked more with the local population that they conquered. And we know this from one of our major stories, the Christian story of the crucifixion of Jesus. Pontius Pilate is portrayed as trying to negotiate between the very conservative reactionary Jewish leaders, the Sanhedrin, who wanted to crucify the guy, and his own instincts, and you get the notion that he's conflicted by it. But he's been working with King Herod and the religious leaders, and I just think it's an interesting story because it reflects the Roman concessions that were made in ruling their empire, which was why they lasted longer than the Greek Empire. The Greeks were a shooting star, marvelous. What a great 150 years they had, but they couldn't make it last. And also in the Mediterranean, the rule of law, two best examples coming from the West, the Emperor Justinian, who took all of the Roman legal history and put it into one great work. And then King Alfred and his notions of the law, and where we get our system of precedent, law based on precedent, as opposed to the Roman view of set law that you follow regardless of precedent. And then I thought it'd be interesting to look at the three classical societies based on the key features of prestige, mobility, and equity, and how that relates to the definitions I've just laid out, with China representing ethical, Hindu representing the caste system, and the Mediterranean, more notions of consent. So the group at the top of the pyramids, of course, in China, it would be the bureaucrats who are administering the ethical system. In India, it's the priests and the Brahmins. And then the status of merchants. In the Mediterranean, it's more of an individual-oriented society. And so the free market, and if you make a lot of money, good, merchants are valued. Whereas in China, the history there is very, very different. They're distrusted. Their wealth can all be seen as a threat to the ethical system. They can bypass it with their money and corruption. And when you look at the social mobility, in the West, in the Mediterranean, the free market, commerce, the path to upward path to aristocracy. In China, with a meritocracy, you've got great mobility, but wait a minute, to pass the exams, you need advantages. And I mean, we see that in our society today, right? To get into Ivy League schools, the best predictor is your parents' wealth and support. So that's not surprising. In India, there's no social mobility because of the caste system. The status of peasants. In the ethical system of China, you take the hardest thing to do and you turn it into a virtue. So the peasants were considered the backbone of society in the Confucian system. And guess what? In Mao's revolution, he talked about being fish swimming in the sea of the peasants. And that was the secret to the success of his revolution. In the West, there's lower regard for physical labor. In the free market, who wants to work your butt off if you can make money in a more interesting way? India is kind of intermediate. And then finally, the status of the old, which is, of course, one of my favorite dimensions these days. In China, the old were venerated for maintaining the family and the ethical system. In the Mediterranean society, there was one source I read that said of the three, the Mediterranean society was the most likely to make fun of the aged. So there you are. And then inequality. How do you justify inequality? In the Mediterranean, it's, well, you got talent, you deserve it. In China, it's, well, if you're wise and you pass the exams, then you have the mandate of heaven to administer the Confucian ethical code. And the glue that holds these three classic societies together, in the Mediterranean society, it would be the law. Now, you know, obviously that gets broken over and over again, and you see corrupt Roman emperors. So there's many exceptions to these vast generalizations, and this is a very broad brush, but I just find it useful as a starting point. To say, okay, this is the likelihood, this is the tendency, but wow, it sure gets broken a lot, and breach of law is quite common in Mediterranean European. So it's just a starting place. I'm not saying that it's absolute glue that works all the time. In India, it was more karma, fate. You were born into your caste system, deal with it. And maybe you'll, the hope is that you got another life after you leave this one with reincarnation. So hang in there. This is just one chapter in the trajectory of your existence in the cosmos. In China, it was a matter of obligation. You're in the Confucian system. Are you a son? Are you a daughter? Are you a father? Are you a mother? What's your relationship to the emperor ultimately, who has the mandate of heaven? And of the three, for the longest period of time, India was the richest. So if you're measuring success by material wealth, India was the most successful for long periods of time. In China, Ramsey likes to say, each dynasty had about 6 generations before the Confucian system, the meritocracy broke down, usually victim of corruption. Parents buying their kids into the passing the exam. Sound familiar? We've had, of course, big time scandals in this country. Parents buying their way into elite schools. So, and in China, when you read the full thrust of Chinese history, it is not stable. Dynasties come and fall, and there are many what they call millenarian movements, mostly starting as Taoist religious cults that when the peasants are unhappy and they rebel, they generally follow some religious cult, which is one reason the Chinese communists are so paranoid about Falun Gong, because Falun Gong is just a quite typical religious cult that comes out of China periodically and quite often is part, and not probably not the reason, but it's the final act in the fall of dynasties. And they have all kinds of colorful names like the Red Turban Rebellion, or the Yellow Hat, or and quite often they were Buddhist cults or Taoist cults. So the glue probably is working best in India, although it's certainly being challenged at the moment. China, you think you've seen a lot of ups and downs, and is the communist system just part of a new dynasty? And it looked like they had the big conundrum of succession worked out. Each leader gets 10 years, picks his successor, and leaves. Well, this guy, Xi, isn't going to do that. He's broken that. So all bets are off with a smooth succession in China because he's defying the solution that had been honored, at least by the two previous presidents. So this is a way that I look at these 6 different ways of managing power, and my values. Obviously, at the very lowest is violence. Who wants to live in a violent society? And here you have the alpha male and his clan, and ultimately many clans forming a tribe. That turns into a feudalism that can be dynastic, inherited from father to son. And Steven Pinker in Our Better Angels just outlines how terrible it was to live in violent societies ruled by alpha males and tribes. There was just constant warfare. And I think he had data that 15% of the bodies that have been recovered from those periods, people died of violence, a violent death. Now you go on and you get a monarch, a guy that has all the power, and maybe you have less warfare with a monarch. That's good. And if you get institutions established where the administration has a monopoly on power, then that's good. And Pinker sees this as the establishment of a police function in society as being a huge step forward in decreasing the amount of violence. And often this institutional police can be independent. And you can argue that in Russia, the police function has been somewhat independent, with the KGB morphing into something completely different setting up a kleptocracy. But who wants to live in that? And with each step, violence decreases. So I'm pushing violence off to the left with each layer in my little visual model. Now you add religion, and that is a stabilizing institution. So I'd say a civilization with a firm religion is going to have less violence. And we saw that with Egypt, the priests of Egypt, and we see it with the Hindu priests in India. Then if you can add on a ethical system. So here in China, you had Taoism, and Buddhism came in relatively late, but let's just say Taoism. Then on top of that, you layer Confucianism, and you have both creating and managing power. And so you obviously you might get less of it. And then you add on the layer of commerce and trade and the prosperity. And I made the argument that the Italian city-state was the next step in evolution in my value system. It was a great step. Consent, if you get, now Rome had a Senate 500 BCE. So its consent system lasted a very long time. Julius Caesar finally ended it, and then consent was a little bit more iffy. But you get the consent of Alfred and Justinian, and we make a big deal about the Magna Carta. It was consent not for the people, but it was the consent that the aristocrats, the minor warlords, could exact from the monarch. And that led to parliaments. And even in the Holy Roman Empire, you have the electors, which we'll get to when we move on to the age of Reformation and reason. So I say you add all these layers and you get much less violence. And then with Florence, where you've got the prosperity, you've got enlightened patrons, as Tina and Carol and Aiko showed us. Man, oh man, you get all this beautiful art and expression. You get reason, science, journalism. We saw in the university system that sprouted up in Italy, and then you get the ultimate layer on top of all that, which is a glue for society, the drama, the beautiful paintings, the wonderful music. And hopefully with each stage of civilization, you get less violence, but violence is always there. It's always underlying and threatens to break out, as we saw January 6th. Anyway, this is part of my attempt to answer Juan Jose's question, what is civilization? The last, turning to the last 1,000 years now, we had it's called the Age of Religion, and we had with that also the growth of trade. And I think that they were related. You can have long distance credit and trust if you're dealing with people who have the same faith. We saw that with Islam. The Islam trading empire that went from Spain all the way to Indonesia had a tremendous advantage. We've seen that when we covered Judaism, we saw that Judaism succeeded because they could arrange for long distance credit and trust from fellow Jews in other cities. It wasn't an accident. Sure, they weren't inhibited by the usury laws. But I also think that that was an important contribution to the age of religion. Um, and if you have a religion, you believe in a divine order, maybe you take more risks, and all this led to a virtuous circle. Keeping track of trade, Juan Jose, we can thank Indian mathematicians whose concept of zero was spread by the Arabs. We can also thank the accounting, double entry accounting that we saw emerge in the Italian city-states, because they became masters of banking and promoting new ways of organizing trade. And finally, under religion, a lot of charitable giving supplemented tax systems and ameliorated inequality. We see that in Islam. One of the 5 pillars is giving alms. Mormon religion, 10%. So that was new. So let's take a look how much trade expanded. So this is our baseline at the end of the classical era. And in the year 500, when our period started, and we're looking what happened, these are the trade routes. But look what happened. They just kept growing. They just kept growing, and they expanded everywhere. And I think a lot of this is probably interactions, virtuous cycle with religious belief. And the downside from this increased connectivity and communications is pandemics, and we get the Black Death. And the other one is tongue in cheek, I say Norwegian rats. This comes from The Sixth Extinction, a book about environment that I think is one of the best. The Sixth Extinction, she goes, the first 5 were caused by meteorites and volcanoes. But the 6th one is going to be caused by human beings. In this book, Elizabeth Kolbert talks about the Norwegian rat and how human mobility around the planet on ships spread the Norwegian rat, which became for her a metaphor for the damage that human restlessness can do. I got the term restless from her. She sees restlessness among humans as being at the core problem. Norwegian rat is restlessness from travel, but also our restlessness, our ambition, that we become super consumers, unheeding our environment. And the Norwegian rat, I'll just give you one example. It goes into Hawaii, and it can climb trees. The Portuguese explorers bring it. It can climb trees, and it eats birds' eggs. And so that's just one very small example of what she's talking about with the 6th extinction. So, but it goes back to our restlessness. Now, here we are, we're restless in this world, but hey, there's not much restlessness over here, and that's going to be the second part of today's talk. So we end the age of religion with the religions that have spread. So here's how they have spread. And I put this whole thing up. This focuses on the old world. I put the whole world up though, so you can just see the color coding. Uh, the red, basically the dark red is early Christianity, and then the pink is the spread of Christianity by the end of the 1500s. The dark blue is Islam at the beginning of the age of religion, and add the light blue, how it's spread. And what's not shown here is the sea lanes that opened up to Indonesia. So you have Islamic takeover of a lot of Indonesia, Bali being one of the last places that hangs on to Hinduism, which makes it such an attractive tourist advantage. But Sufi monks were part of also the trade. And the Sufi version of Islam is a very gentle version. And this was part of the spread of Islam that's not totally captured on this map. The Buddhism, born in India, but the Hindus, after 400 or 500 years of Buddhist rulers like Ashoka in India, the Hindus take their country back. No more of this reform. Buddhism was to Hinduism as Protestantism is to Catholicism. It was a reform movement. But the Counter-Reformation, the Hindu Counter-Reformation was successful, and Buddhism was cast out, but it survived in China in a striped fashion, sharing with Confucianism and Taoism. A very diverse religious tradition in China. But in Southeast Asia, places that we visited, like Burma, Cambodia, Laos. And then along the Silk Road, you had the Bamiyan Buddhist statues that the Taliban blew up. Who knows what they're going to blow up now? You had the Buddhist caves and the Gobi Desert along the Silk Road that Aiko and I had the privilege of visiting with Jeremy. And so the spread of Buddhism, I just point out, I think this is pinkish. There's a group of Nestorian Christians on the steppes, and believe it or not, Genghis Khan's mother was Nestorian Christian. So what an interesting world. This is more the close-up of just, once you've got the color coding, I'll give you a second just to see it again. And here the pink comes through a little bit better where the Nestorians are, the Mongol minority. And here you see Ethiopia as a Christian country, kind of outflanking the southern flank of Islam. In 1450, we remember that the Orthodox Christianity is still alive and doing well. In 1450, they're not showing Russian Christianity. That's interesting, but that's going to be a thing. And that's the end of the map. Just a word about women. Both Buddhism and Christianity were a step forward for women. There was an equality of souls. The harsh Abrahamic religions were very masculine. The story of Genesis reflects that. But both Buddhism and Christianity in their original forms were a step forward for the spirituality of the human project. Obviously, they didn't last, and now you've got Buddhist mobs attacking Muslims in Burma. And we're going to see that there's going to be religious wars that are going to tear Europe apart in the Reformation and the so-called Age of Reason. But the initial ideas are very attractive. And there was a place for women to go. They could go to abbeys as a place of retreat in Europe. And Asian women who are, I think, carry an even heavier burden did have a refuge. But for women in general during the last 1,000 years, you can argue that the merchant economy that emerged gave women less of a central role than they'd had when the focus was more agriculture and arts and crafts. And they were excluded from a lot of the town guilds. And the point's been made that maybe religion distracted women disproportionately than men, but that's arguable. We could spend a whole hour talking about that. Just quick review: the Arabs, they were on the move during this period, ending up in the ability to attract all these pilgrims to Mecca. Can you guess where this is with the spread of Barb's coming back in? I'll let her participate. Yeah, guess where this place was? This artist model that actually came to fruition. Guess where this is? This is in Walnut Creek. This is the Sufi in Walnut Creek. Tim knows one of his friends was in the Sufi. His family was in the Sufi community. So just real quick, what's going on in China during the last 1,000 years? I've pretty much covered this. Just a contrast between China and Western Europe. That's the contrast that we're most interested in today. The north-south long distance trade revolutionized and tied Europe together. You had the Mongol peace, allowed Europe to participate and see the luxuries coming from Asia. The merchants in China became rich, but they were not valued, and they did not become dominant. And in the end, the Confucian mandarins pulled back from connecting and trading with the world. But they stuck to their ideology of cooperation and harmonious relationship. That was their ideal. It didn't always work out, but the West, on the other hand, of all the societies, was more individualistic, which led to the Reformation. Martin Luther was the ultimate individualist, arguing that man's relationship with God is an individual relationship, and nowhere else do you get this kind of emphasis. This is one of Ramsey's slides trying to make that point. Here, the meritocracy is striving and doing well. Their mistake is they undervalue commerce. They undervalue trade with other countries, and they pull back the Admiral Hayes explorations to Africa, for instance. they're still a source of innovation that we get along the Silk Road. And I don't have to go through those. The problem with women in China and their lesser place in the Buddhist, I'm sorry, in the Confucian ethical system, meant that when Buddhism came, and with its notions of the equality of souls, it got restricted by the Confucianists. So the Chinese version of Buddhism is the women don't have as much power as was originally envisioned by the Buddha. But Buddhism has survived in China, as we saw. It has survived in Asia. The Mediterranean, what was the downside? Christianity, there was some signs of intolerance and slavery, particularly in southern Europe. Spain and Italy participated. Spain, because of their relationship, actually subservience to Islam, which was very heavily involved in the sub-Saharan slave trade. Intolerance, Paul Burns' books in Ephesus, and this intolerance we saw. I think we've touted the movie Agora. It shows Christian intolerance and all too well. And Venice was, we showed photos or pictures of Venice and its participation in the slave trade as well. So the different cultures interacted. I've already mentioned the pandemics, but the Crusades. And here's Richard the Lionhearted and Saladin. The last big battle. There were more smaller battles afterwards. Marco Polo opens things up and brings news to Europe, but also the plague comes, and we've gone over that many times. So this is kind of where how the age of religion ends. The church in Europe was not able to protect the citizenry from this pandemic. They lost a lot of credibility. I think we've gone over this. The only thing in this slide that I really want to emphasize, that in Europe and Europe alone, you get a questioning and opening up. It starts with Peter Abelard, and in this period ends with Michelangelo and Da Vinci that Carol, Tina, and Aiko talked about. And we have to remember that this is just in the cities, in particular in Florence. In the countryside and in smaller cities, it's still that same old tendency for violence is still there. You still have warfare. The French invade. The Pope becomes a soldier. There's still feudalism. So when I'm talking about some of these tendencies, it's just on the very tippy top of society. And a lot of what's going to happen in the next 500 years is how that's eventually going to trickle down, not always in very pleasant ways. Islam doubles down on religion. So as opposed to Christianity, where the religion is weakened and split, and the ulama, they decided, hey, we're not going to have this printing press. So they held off for 250 years, kind of echoing what the Ming did, closing themselves off. And that might be one reason that we're going to see in the age of discovery, it's the Europeans who innovated because of the way they improved sailing in the Mediterranean, navigational devices, maps, and again, this long distance credit of faith. And here we see the year 1500, India is still number one, but here's Europe, all these different colors or places in Europe starting to grow. China slowly starting to shrink by the onset of the Industrial Revolution. So there's already the tendency before the Industrial Revolution. And this is the full arc where India and China ultimately in the age of discovery are going to get really squeezed out. And now there's been a reversal in year 1990 and onward. China in particular is coming back. Because the Pope became a soldier and got involved in politics and secular activities, it became corrupt. The Renaissance papacy and Erasmus said, hey, you guys, you're abandoning the original purpose of the church, reform. And they didn't reform, so things fell to this guy, who's going to take us into the next age of history. The fall of Constantinople exacerbates things. The Ottomans take absolute control of the Silk Road. So that increases the pressure to find another way to Asia. How can we get to Asia? Christopher Columbus has an idea. And this is going to lead to the next topic, the New World. But I just want to say the age of religion, the legacy is, here are the areas where Islam is in control, predictable from what we already know in 1500. So the table is set. Christianity, you can see Catholicism, Eastern Orthodox. Russia finally makes it onto the religious map here. And the Buddhism, Hinduism and Buddhism, very interesting that we could have predicted a lot of this map, but obviously not the New World because it just gotten there. But a lot of the Old World map was predictable. Just to point out, Indonesia now it has more Muslims than anybody else. Pakistan's in second, and India is third, even though they're 20% of the Indian population. They're 10% of the world Muslim population. Religion. So the age of religion, the legacy lingers. People identify from what happened during those 1,000 years. But there's a new civilization that comes in to creation with Columbus, and it's the Latin. And finally, Juan Jose, where to Latin America, what is civilization? And this Spanish area created a unique additional civilization. All these other civilizations we knew about. And America, North America is just an extension of Europe. But the combination of the way Spain colonized and the persistence of the Native American culture and how it survived in Central and South America, where it really hasn't in North America. How that happened is an interesting story. So this story starts in 1492. And I'm gonna stop here and I don't know who that is. And take any questions. It looks like I'm not going to get to. I could start the new world. I could get us going on that, but I'll stop for a second and ask for questions.
I don't really have a question, Dad, but something that you said that reminded me of something. I remember when I was in Hawaii last. We were on the Big Island, and there's mongoose everywhere.
Uh-huh.
And it's an invasive species. I guess they brought it from India. But do you want to guess why they brought the mongoose to Hawaii originally?
To take care of rats.
Yeah, to take care of the rat population. And it has not been good because they kill all the like native birds and stuff too. So
yeah. And you look at Australia, it's the same thing. Bring in one species to control another species, and then before you know it, you got bunny rabbit, you got rabbits all over the place. Yeah, I think frogs and cats have been involved in different experiments, but yeah, you can't mess with Mother Nature. But a lot
You know
of
what? Oh, you know what they did when we went to New Zealand? They fumigated the plane before we got off to get, make sure that we didn't bring anything, which
oh
I thought was interesting.
yeah, huh?
I thought that was pretty clever.
Aiko, you're muted. I can hear Aiko trying to talk.
Oh,
That's one of her advantages of being in Walnut Creek. Aiko, you're still muted. Do I have to unmute you? So while we're waiting for Aiko to unmute herself, I'd like to at least get started on the New World so you know that I'm actually ready to talk about it. Can I do that? Okay.
Yeah, bring it on. Bring it on.
yeah, go for it. I'm on my little phone. So, but I'm here.
Okay, good. So I want to introduce the New World. We haven't said much about the New World. So I'm going to show a few slides. It's going to show the Old World, but there's a lot going on in the New World, quite a bit. And they participated in the agricultural revolution. So, the existence of the human species for 200,000 years, let's round off. And humans have been in the New World for 20,000. So we have a common background for 90% of humanity. It's just been the last 10% where we split pathways. And so if Homo sapiens could stumble onto agriculture here, they're certainly going to stumble onto agriculture over here, and without any direct communication, but independently. And so here are the areas of agriculture, which is a prerequisite for civilization, right? You've got to have a surplus to have a civilization. And so what did they grow? We know the New World's famous for having corn. If you Michael Pollan's The Omnivore's Dilemma, he has a whole chapter on corn. It's just an amazing chapter where you realize that it really is a good crop. A lot of advantages. But it's got to be combined with beans because it's lacking an amino acid. So you get pellagra if you just have a corn only diet, and the potato. And so I'm gonna give more attention to the New World since we've ignored them. And the reason, Juan Jose, is I wanted to tell a cohesive story about civilizations in the West. It's hard enough to understand with that without going back and forth to what was going on in the New World. So I'm going to try to make up for it with the next couple of lectures. And obviously the other thing is tobacco that was used medicinally as well as to smoke. So the agricultural revolution. But here's the big difference. The big difference between the old world and the new world was the number of domesticated mammals. And why is that important? Domesticated mammals cause disease, zoonoses, in human beings. We just had an example of wild animals, but in being sold in domestic markets, causing a zoonosis of COVID. But all of our major viral diseases came from animals and from living with animals. So over thousands of years, since the agricultural revolution 10,000 years ago, I think domestication of animals came, it took a couple of thousand. So let's say 8,000 years living with animals, getting their diseases, developing immunity to them. And that is going to play a big role when these two populations meet. Okay, very important to realize that that's why the old world had the immunological advantage, which accounted for 90% of the drop off in population in the New World, where they were getting all of this suddenly. The other thing is the ability to share knowledge along this axis. Why is this important? This is the same latitude, right? So the weather, not identical, but the weather is similar. So if somebody discovers some useful farming seed here, eventually it gets all the way here. But Africa and the Americas suffer from being on the long axis. Somebody discovers a new way of doing things that's applicable only to this climate belt. It doesn't spread. It can't spread because the climates are too different. So that was an informational advantage, if you will, in developing new agricultural technologies. So it was, this dictates, geography dictates that it's these people who are going to discover these people and not the other way around, that these people are going to be advanced. Now, we could spend the whole hour arguing that proposition, but it's a point of departure, and it's a point Jared Diamond endorses. So I've already showed you this series of slides, the increase of trade in the old world. I've already showed you that. We've talked about the innovations, but look, there's not that much trade going on here. All this activity, all this communication, really based on the long axis, the ecumen between Europe and Asia, and you don't get that in the New World. but in the New World, you do get civilizations over time, and this is not all at the same time. So this is all the accumulated civilizations mapped out, but it's not contemporaneous. You know, Olmec was the only game in town at the very beginning. And eventually, when Columbus comes, it's the Aztecs and the Incas. They're two empires at that time. But it begins with the Olmecs somewhere around 1400 BCE, and they are listed as one of the river civilizations. So Juan Jose and I remember the 4 river civilizations of the Old World: the Nile, Mesopotamia, the Indus, and China. And 3 of these civilizations become classic: the China, the Indian, the Mediterranean. But here we are over here. There's something going on here in Mesoamerica, the Olmecs, at the time of the 4 river civilizations. And there's also something going on the west coast of Latin America, the Chalan. And just to give you a little preview as I'm about ready to end this for today, Juan Jose, I will be mentioning the Muisca, who you mentioned, the people who threw gold into the lake. You did for your show and tell. They will be making an appearance later on. You'll remember one of our earlier lists that I had my audiovisual department come up with of the key dates, and we noted that there was something going on in the Andes quite early, and then about the time of Moses, you get the Olmecs. And so this is where I'll return to next time. I think this is a good place to stop. We'll go back. We kind of saw where the Olmecs fit in. They're the beginning of what is civilization in the New World. So I am going to stop. And I am going to ask for final questions.
Okay, so I don't really have any question, but I just believe that next class is going to be really amazing because in my personal experience, the culture, the civilization that was started in Mexico is one of the biggest and most advanced in South America, well, in Latin America, as well as the Incas. So when you come to see the comparisons of how the civilization was per se in Colombia versus Mexico, there is a huge difference. So it's going to be really interesting to see that.
Okay, I'm so glad I'm finally getting around. I've been feeling guilty for how many months have we been at this, Juan Jose? 14 months. And I keep saying, oh, I should do something on the new, I should do something on the New World. Finally, this guilt is somewhat relieved.
Glad to hear.
I'm really excited. This is going to be great and maybe we need to extend what you're talking about in terms of Latin America and South America, because it's a really enormous culture that I don't really know anything about.
Well, we'll give it a try. And
Thank you, Juan.
maybe it's maybe Juan Jose as part. At some point you're going to be moving, right?
At some point, we still don't know the where, because I had some issues with my US visa, so we might change the location. We still don't know where. Could be Europe, could be Asia. So like I'm gonna start from scratch.
Not Northern Kentucky?
Not Northern Kentucky.
Oh,
Well, if you're going to be hanging around a while, maybe we could ask you to make a contribution on the on your home civilization.
I will be glad to do that.
Yeah, we're so Euro dominated that I think we need a local to speak.
Yeah, we
So-
need that, and
so-
I'm here to represent.
Okay, be thinking about it since you're not going to be going to Northern Kentucky next month.
Okay, I'll think about it.
Aiko, you're muted.
When will you find out where you will be going?
Probably in 1 month. So the thing is that a vacancy needs to be open worldwide, which I will be interested on, and then I will initiate the process. So probably in 1 month, I will know where exactly in the world I will be working.
Wow.
So maybe you go to Northern Italy after all.
Exactly. So that's what keeps me moving. So
Oh
let's
man.
see.
Oh man, I was looking forward to visiting you in Northern Kentucky, but if you're going to Northern Italy,
Yeah, we'll come visit you.
All of you, all of my classmates and professors can come.
ah,
awesome.
great, we'll be there.
Nice.
Okay, any other questions?
Thank you.
Big house. I have to miss, I'm gonna be in Idaho. I'll be on a plane next week, actually going to Idaho, so I'll miss next week.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
But see you the week after.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
So Juan Jose, are you and Tim in the same city?
No, I'm currently in Bogota, and he's like in a town outside of Bogota called Sopo.
Oh. But it's not too far from Bogota though.
No, it's like an hour away, so it's really close. We were actually there last weekend, and the place it's astonishing. It has a great view.
Oh, really?